Just about everybody on all sides of the Iran war debate is taking a victory lap today. Everybody was right, it seems, and everybody has won. The notable exception is Israel. As we speak, is continuing to pound Lebanon. Israeli officials say the ceasefire doesn't include Lebanon and the war must go on, a direct contradiction of the Pakistani and US position. Today, the leader of Israel's opposition said that if this ceasefire is as good as it gets, it will amount to, quote, one of the most severe strategic failures in Israeli history. None of this bodes well for a permanent end to the war, unless, that is, President Trump is about to break with Bibi Netanyahu. Somewhat lost in the excitement of Trump's vow to end Iranian civilization yesterday, New York Times released an extraordinary report on how Netanyahu made the case for war in the White House. The Israeli premier, it says, planned a simple mission with swift regime change, but it had to be now. Or General Kane, the top US military official, reportedly told the president, "Sir, this is, in my experience, standard operating procedure for the Israelis. They oversell and their plans are not always well developed. They know they need us and that's why they're hard selling." All of this appears to echo the position of Vice President J.D. Vance and the former Secretary of State Antony Blinken. For several weeks now, we've been told it's an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory to say that Israel dragged the US into this war. Perhaps the only people who can plausibly declare victory today are those who said the evidence suggested otherwise. To debate all of this, I'm joined by Joe Kent, the former director of the US National Counterterrorism Center, and Will Chamberlain, the senior counsel at the Article 3 Project. Well, welcome to both of you. Joe Kent, a lot of what you said when you resigned appears to have been pretty much confirmed by that New York Times report, which is extremely detailed and paints a picture of Netanyahu in the White House, in the Situation Room, with the head of Mossad appearing on a screen next to him, in which he laid out a 4-point plan for why this would work: decapitating the regime, the people would rise up, they would be too powerless to shut the Strait of Hormuz, and so on, most of which has not happened. What do you feel about the fact there's now this ceasefire, albeit it seems quite a perilous one? Is it a recognition, do you think, by President Trump that he's got to get out of this?
I think it's a good thing that President Trump took the opportunity to enact a ceasefire and to get both sides to the negotiating table. I think what's key, though, is that President Trump has to realize, in order to accomplish our strategic goal, which is ending this conflict, reopening the Straits of Hormuz, and maintaining the alliances that we have in the Gulf, he has got to restrain the Israelis. The Israelis have a different strategic goal than we do. They want to take down the entire regime. They don't care how long it takes. They don't care how much we have to commit in terms of blood and treasure. So the Israelis and us have parted ways in terms of strategic objectives. We have to be honest with ourselves. It sounds like, considering the fact that someone shared the origins of this war with the New York Times, that is recognized now by this administration. So the first thing that President Trump has to do in order to make sure this lasts is actually restrain the Israelis, take away key components of the military aid that we give them so that they lack the capability to go on the offense and to spoil this ceasefire.
Will Chamberlain, your response to that?
I think that's a completely incoherent idea, not merely wrong, but just incoherent. First off, it presupposes we have the ability to take away their offensive capabilities. Newsflash, they already have them. We can't just seize them. Are we going to invade Israel and take their planes? We can't. They have the F-35. They have these capabilities. Remember, they launched the 12-day war on their own. So,
but even America, the debate itself on that point, Will, on that point, the Americans could withdraw their funding. The billions of dollars that go to the Israelis, which they use to fund their own military, that could just be withdrawn. So America isn't powerless. It can exercise that power.
Right, but the offensive capabilities they would need to strike Iran, they already have. They're the second biggest air force in the world today. Even if we said we're not going to give you $4 billion a year going forward, that wouldn't stop anything. And then the second point is that this is an unbelievably silly approach to foreign policy because we haven't hammered out final terms with the Iranians yet. We're still in the middle of negotiations. The idea that we would restrain our ally, who, by the way, just helped us achieve one of the greatest military victories of the modern era, we would restrain them instead of trying to use the threat of continued belligerence from them to extract more punitive terms from the Iranians is silly. It's just completely antithetical to how things should work. And the idea that we need to be worried about our Gulf neighbors who would be upset if we didn't restrain the Israelis is also absurd, because our Gulf neighbors are on our side. And this war has not only solidified our position militarily, it's solidified it diplomatically, because all those countries are furious with the Iranians and are on our side and want to strengthen cooperation with both us and Israel.
But what is clear from that New York Times report, it seems to be incredibly well sourced. So somebody's been talking who was in that room. What is clear from that is that the Israelis, maybe this was an honest mistake on their part, a misreading of the situation, but they certainly appear to be of the belief, if you took out the Ayatollah and some of the top people with him, that this would then lead to an uprising by the people, and that amid all this chaos, there would be no ability to close the Strait of Hormuz. Well, none of that has really happened. Yes, they got rid of the Ayatollah, but he's just been replaced by other similarly minded people. And then there's been no uprising by the Iranian people whatsoever. And of course, the Strait of Hormuz has been held in a kind of stranglehold by the Iranians in a very powerful way. It has to be conceded, which has caused enormous damage to the global economy. They've basically controlled that strait now for 4 or 5 weeks, and it's caused hell. And none of that appears to have been predicted by the Israelis in their sales pitch to Trump to join them on this war.
Well, so I think you're overstating a number of things there. First off, I mean, the Iranian Navy is gone, right? They're controlling the strait by threatening to shoot at people, but they don't have any naval forces meaningfully in the area. And the idea, remember, they were thinking that card, which is their only trump card, that's the maximum.
But it's a very powerful card. And it's one that the Israelis did not think they had the power. Right. According to the New York Times
report, the Israelis might have made a slight misjudgment on that effect. It's war. I think the Iranians made a much bigger misjudgment overall when you talk about the complete destruction of their military capability.
Right, but if you take away the Strait of Hormuz issue, then you've got overwhelming military dominance by the Americans and Israelis. Yes, the Iranians would have still attacked their neighbouring Gulf states, but that would be a military conflict part of it. The fact that the Strait of Hormuz has been shut pretty much for 5 weeks, that has been an asymmetric war, which, with the best will in the world, has been wielded very successfully by the Iranians. For whatever reason.
I don't think so at all. I think that's actually been wielded quite poorly. 2 weeks ago, let me finish my point, Joe, and then you can speak. 2 weeks ago, the Iranians were saying, we're not going to give up the Strait of Hormuz unless we get a permanent peace deal, a permanent commitment to non-aggression and reparations. What are they trading it for as of yesterday? 2-week ceasefire, no promises. They can't even extract a commitment from the Israelis to stop fighting Hezbollah. That's how badly they're beaten.
OK. Well, Joe, he called you silly and incompetent, I think, earlier. So this is your chance to respond.
So prior to this war, the Straits of Hormuz were transited by anybody trading oil for free. Post-war, the Iranians are going to be able to extract a fee. That's one of their negotiating chips they have now.
No, they won't.
Prior to the war, the Ayatollah that we killed was actually at the negotiating table with us. The reason why none of this was taken into account is because the Israelis didn't really care about what would happen to the Straits of Hormuz. They didn't care what would happen to our Gulf allies. Our Gulf allies right now still technically are with us, but the fact that we were unable to provide them with security guarantees lowers our status in the region, potentially could threaten the petrodollar in the region. And so right now we're in a weaker position because we listened to a foreign government that had a different strategic goal in mind than we did. So it's great that we got the ceasefire. We need to maintain that ceasefire, and we have to actually withhold things from the Israelis, which we can do. The Israelis do have a modern air force, but they rely on us for a lot of the logistics, the refueling, in order to be able to reach into Iran. So we very much are in the driver's seat of what we provide.
Well, that's not true, Joe. That's just obviously false, because we didn't help them with refueling.
No, it's 100% true. They can't reach into. They cannot reach into Israel. I've actually been in the military, man. I've been part of these operations.
Then explain how they did the 12-day war without refueling. If we weren't participating in the offensive operations,
we helped them out a good.
Struck the hell out of
Well, we helped them out a good deal with logistics. They can't sustain operations without us. They wouldn't be able to continue to sustain operations all the way into Iran with conventional military forces in any meaningful way without our support. We have to pull that back. We also have to pull back their ability to go on the offense outside of their borders, because it's going to interfere with the peace that we're trying to achieve. Right now, we're paying for their defense, we're paying for the offense, and also in terms of our status in the region and our ability to keep commerce and oil flow going out of the Straits of Hormuz and the Middle East, all of that is being negatively affected by us listening to a foreign government. So we have to put Israel back in the junior partner role if we're going to accomplish our strategic
Why couldn't you
objectives.
persuade Pete Hegseth of any of this?
Well, I tried. So therefore,
And he didn't agree with you, and he has better intelligence than you. You weren't privy to any of this stuff. Like, you just don't know. That's why you're now on the outside doing podcasts instead of inside the administration trying to shape policy. You don't know.
Well,
You didn't persuade him.
from the inside. Like, look, man, my letter of resignation has been out there. What's important right now is that we support President Trump in getting this peace deal and making sure it actually sticks. The problem is, as confirmed by the New York Times, that was well sourced from within the West Wing,
it wasn't.
the
You guys are
Israelis were
mischaracterizing the New
in
York
the
Times
driver's seat for all of this. Well, if you read the article, I think it's pretty evident. You know how leaks work in Washington, D.C. with the New York Times.
Well, if you say if you say it wasn't well sourced, which part are you contesting?
Oh, no, it was well sourced. You guys are just mischaracterizing how much influence Israel had based on what was written in that article.
What?
Which was Israel gave a presentation.
Did you read it?
Yeah, I read it completely. And then after the Israelis were offline, right, then you had the meeting between the U.S. principals, in which John Ratcliffe and others were talking about, the Israelis are overselling their ability to achieve regime change. That's probably not going to happen. But they said, on what we've thought for a while is when it comes to missiles and when it comes to their ballistic shield and when it comes to their Navy, we have the capability to do that, and we should do that. And so the idea that, we didn't get suckered into a regime change war. From the outset, American goals did not include regime change. From Trump's very first speech,
Donald Trump literally talked about regime change early on. Literally. Donald Trump literally said
regime change was an objective of the war. Fact check me on that after. He never did.
You don't think Donald Trump ever mentioned regime change?
Incorrect. I didn't say that. I said it wasn't a military objective
Donald
of the
Trump
war.
is
He said
still
it would be nice to have,
today
but it's not
that
the
he
goal
has
of the war.
affected. He's claiming today he's affected regime change. What are you talking about?
He's affected it. That's because he's basically saying we killed all the senior leadership, which we did, by the way, in an unprecedented fashion.
So who's running the country?
But that doesn't mean it was an original military objective of the war.
Iran right
Fact check
now?
me on this, man. Go look at his original statements.
I've read them all, mate.
It would be nice to have, but it's not an objective of the war.
Trump changed his goalposts every 10 seconds. That's been part of the
this has been remarkably consistent from Hegseth, Rubio on down. Go look at their public statements. What did they say? An official objective of Operation Edge is regime change.
Why did America launch a preemptive strike against Iran? Well,
to essentially prevent them from building up a further ballistic missile capability as a shield behind which they would be able to develop their nuclear weapons program. That's the core reason.
That was not the reason given by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.
Go look it up, man. He said it over and over and over again.
On camera, he said when he was first asked the reason the United States launched a preemptive strike against Iran was because another country, brackets Israel, had indicated they were going to attack Iran, and therefore the Americans knew there would be attacks against some of their interests in the Middle East, so they got in first. Marco Rubio's
that was the reason for the timing,
on camera.
Not the reason for the strike. The strategitic reason for the strike, which Rubio explained in that very same press conference. I remember the exact one you're talking about. It's like a gaggle. I think he's in Congress after having a meeting with people. This is very early in the war. He says the reason for the strike is to prevent them from developing their ballistic missile shield further. The reason for the timing, like why today, why February 28th, was the fact that they had this intelligence about the meeting of Ayatollah Khamenei and everybody else, and that Israel was going to go ahead with that under any circumstances. So we should do it now. But I mean, go back and look at that. I know exactly what press conference you're talking about, and I don't think you are remembering one piece of it, but you're not remembering the whole.
It's a pretty significant piece when the Secretary of State of the United States, on record, says that the reason for the preemptive strike by the United States was because Israel was attacking Iran. And then we hear from Antony Blinken, one of his predecessors, that Netanyahu had tried to sell this to both Biden and Obama, and when they both rejected the opportunity to join him in attacking Iran, guess what? Israel didn't attack. So it looks like he got third time lucky with Trump, who went along with it. But had Trump said no, I don't think Israel would have attacked.
Well, but then why did they strike in the 12-day war?
The only
They
reason
did
the
that
attack
without
happened.
American
let's talk
offensive
about
power.
let's talk about the 12-day war. Let me bring Joe back in this. The 12-day war is fascinating because I distinctly remember, and I'm sure Will remember it differently to me, but I remember Donald Trump at the end of the 12-day war saying that this had put back any aspirations by the Iranians to build a nuclear weapon decades, that we had obliterated their nuclear capabilities. It was done, gone. And here we are 9 months later having to launch a full-fledged war in Iran because the threat remains apparently not just the same, but so imminent that America had to act immediately. Now, try and make sense of that for me, Joe.
Well, this is what the Israelis do. They've always wanted this regime change war. And so they continually use their influence through official channels and then also through their echo chamber in the media to move the red line. They did this with the enrichment issue. President Trump initially said, our policy is no nuclear weapons for Iran. The Iranian Supreme Leader agreed. There was a lot of space there for negotiations. There was negotiations that were taking place for several months. Then the pro-Israel lobby basically came in and convinced President Trump that the new red line was zero enrichment. 12-day war happens. Operation Midnight Hammer happens. We take away the ability for them to enrich. The Iranians withhold their proxies. They don't retaliate in any meaningful way. They get right back to the negotiating table. And then we're hearing basically what Will just said. Oh, now we have to go in and attack Iran because of this ballistic missile capability. So the red line moves again every time Israel needs a new justification for the war, and they get the outcome that they want by using their pressure network and their media echo chamber and their official engagements with the U.S. government. They were still worried that we were going to get a deal with the Iranians. And so therefore, they went ahead and said, hey, we're going to preemptively go into Iran and attack, knowing that this attack would be against the regime. Iran's reaction to an attack directly against the regime would be to enact their contingency plan, which would be targeting our bases in the region. So the only actual imminent threat that Iran posed was the attack threat by the Israelis against Iran. There was no imminent Iranian threat attack against us.
No, I don't think there was for a moment. Will Chamberlain, I mean, as we sit here today debating this, the regime remains in place. Trump wants to argue it's different people, therefore it's a new regime. But it's the same people. It's the same regime. It's just the faces of...
Minus the 100 senior leaders who are all dead.
So a few of the leaders have gone, but they've been replaced by others. But they've been replaced by others from the same regime with the same ideology. It would be like saying you've decapitated the Trump regime, but he's replaced by a bunch of people called Trump. It's like, it's kind of...
I mean, that's what happened in Venezuela, right? We effectively took out one person in Venezuela, and now we have a cooperative
government. The regime hasn't
government.
changed in Venezuela. All that's changed is the president got picked up in the middle of the night and put in a New York prison cell. But the regime's continued. His own number two is running it. So the regime is still there. So I think we should be clear about what regime change means, right? With my quaint old head on, regime change means you change the regime. Not that you just take out a few people at the top of it and they get replaced by other people from the same regime. Secondly, the enriched uranium remains in Iran. None of that has been secured by either the Americans or Israelis as we speak. Thirdly, the Straits of Hormuz remain under the control of the Iranians, which they weren't. It wasn't in control of it before this war started. And it is, despite what you say, they are now charging money. Apparently they want to charge $1 a barrel was the last thing I read. And Trump's all for it because it's going to make everyone rich. So they've got the control of that. They've continued to fire rockets, it seems, at some of their Gulf state neighbours. So I'm looking at this historic victory and I'm thinking, well, where's the victory? What is the victory? Because I don't see it. And forgive me if I take with a pinch of salt this idea
let's try this by historical analogy.
Let me finish my point. You can respond. That apparently we're now supposed to believe that rather like 8-9 months ago, Iran's capability of building a nuclear weapon has been destroyed like it was 9 months ago. Well, why can't they just pop up again in 9 months? They've still got all the enriched uranium. What's going to stop them? So, look, I put it to you that the charge sheet against the claim of historic victory is pretty big.
All right, so I'll deal first with that minor point on the enriched uranium, right? President Trump has said
point?
Untrue. No. I mean, in relation to you saying we lost the war. right?
So I didn't say America's lost the war. I'm disputing the claim
that you didn't think it's a big victory.
I'm disputing the claim to historic victory, given the checklist I just presented.
Well, let's imagine, if you will, it's January 1942, a month after Hitler declared war on the United States in the aftermath of Pearl Harbor. And the current military state of affairs is the entire German Navy is at the bottom of the sea. The Luftwaffe is destroyed. There's complete Allied air superiority over Germany. Hitler, Goering, Bormann, and Himmler are all dead in a massive military strike. And yet the German press is claiming the Germans have managed to shut down trade via some rockets in the Danish Straits. Who's winning? Is that like not? I mean, people have lost context about what it means to win a war.
I've lost the plot with that analogy. I'm sorry.
In 5 weeks, we have just decimated Iranian military capability. We struck 13,000 targets, and they managed to hit a single plane, and they couldn't even capture the soldiers that fell out of that plane. It's one of the most lopsided military conflicts in history.
On the neighboring Gulf
and the fact that you have a temporary restraint of trade and an increase in gas by $1 a gallon for a month does not change that in the slightest.
Really?
Yes, 100%.
So you're
it's
looking
a massive
at this
military victory.
Okay, Joe, this is a great victory, and I've lost the plot.
The great victory is the fact that we have a ceasefire, and this could have been much, much worse. However, as opposed to making some like obscure World War II reference, because everything always has to be about World War II, let's just compare the situation between now and just a month ago before the war. The Straits of Hormuz, before this last iteration of war kicked off, the Straits of Hormuz were open for commerce. People and companies could transit that for free. Iran didn't have a stranglehold on that. Our GCC alliance was completely intact. There was still a guarantee of American security. That hadn't been fractured. We had a regime inside of Iran, although they were not the best. It's not exactly what we wanted. They had a prohibition on building a nuclear weapon, and they were involved in active negotiations with us. They were closely adhering to a strict escalation ladder. Their proxies were not attacking us. No, that's exactly what happened. They
had 60%
were not building
enriched
nuclear
uranium.
weapons.
What do you think they were using that for?
What?
Medical purposes?
If they wanted a bomb, they had decades, long before President Trump ever became the president, to develop a nuclear weapon. There was a prohibition by the Ayatollah, which was a reasonable and calculated approach. They didn't want to become like Libya. They didn't want to become like Saddam. They had reached a point where they would keep the capability but not develop a nuclear weapon.
With Witkoff,
and they were in negotiations with us, and we were not at
we
war.
Won't give up our enrichment rights, and we won't give you up anything diplomatically.
But we were at the negotiating table with them. There was a potential for a deal.
Fake. The Iranian nuclear archive, which is
now fast forward to where we're at right now. Look at the Straits of Hormuz. Look at the GCC.
Let me ask Will a question, which is, Will, does Israel have nuclear weapons?
Yes, almost certainly. I mean, they haven't officially claimed it, but almost certainly they do.
Why don't we know for a fact?
Because they don't want to say so, because there's American statutes,
Why do they get a pass? Why do they get a pass about that?
Well, because they're our ally and Iran's our enemy.
See,
it's because we're the good guys.
Okay,
and Iran's the bad guys.
A very interesting admission. So our friends don't need to be transparent about their nuclear capability, but our enemies...
it's good to be America's friend.
But our enemies do.
Yes.
Wow.
That's exactly how it works.
Well, that's
because we have the B-2 bomber and they don't.
Hypocrisy, isn't it?
No, it's only hypocrisy if you don't have a normative view of whether the United States is good and Iran is bad.
I don't think there's
a single...
normative
view of
there is no single...
Yes.
There is no single good reason why Israel should be allowed to refuse to admit whether it has nuclear weapons. There's no reason. They should be
called the international law police.
They should be.
Again, they're a core ally of the United States, and the United States is the most powerful country in the world. This whole multipolarity talk is just silly. There's a unipolar hegemon in the world. It's the United States, and we're also very benevolent. And so Israel, our friend, does it. Gets
when you say America
is, like the Iranians don't,
okay,
that's the way the world works.
When you say America is benevolent, how does that sit with the President of the United States 2 days ago talking about the imminent destruction of an entire civilization?
Oh, you mean like death to America, death to Israel? Right? Like,
no,
we've
I'm
dealt
talking
with
about
for 30
Donald Trump.
years.
Talking about Donald Trump
throws
saying
one post out and everybody loses their crap in the middle of a negotiation and signs a ceasefire within 8 hours.
I'm talking about Donald Trump threatening to annihilate 90 million people in his own words.
McFarland had it right yesterday.
In his own words, on his post. Do you not care about that?
I just see it as negotiating bluster. Trump's been doing this stuff for 40 years.
To threaten genocide?
I mean, that's exactly what the Iranians have been doing to us. They had a clock in the middle of their downtown saying that they were going to destroy the entire country of Israel.
America should be amoral, if not as immoral as its enemies. So what you're saying?
we should be sufficiently ruthless to get our negotiated pieces that actually make sense, which we seem to have done here. Apparently, this focused the Iranians' mind and made them realize they should come to the table.
Are you aware that threatening to commit an act of genocide in itself could be presented as a war crime?
I think that would be frivolous.
Really?
Again, send the International Law Police to the White House if you want.
Joe Kent, what's remarkable is there's a kind of arrogance to the way Will is talking. Like, none of this matters. I think it does matter. I've known Trump a long time. I consider him a friend. But on this, I think he's lost the plot. And I think the idea that from the White House, you issue a statement in your own words threatening the annihilation of an entire civilization, an entire country of 90 million Iranians, I thought was disgraceful, absolutely disgraceful, and could well be a crime.
I'm glad that President Trump's tactic worked out and we have a ceasefire. I think what's critical is that we make sure that we keep the Straits of Hormuz open, get the negotiating table. We have to hold back Israel to make that happen. If our goal was to make sure that Iran didn't get a nuclear weapon or that other states that we're adversarial with get a nuclear weapon, we just set a horrible example here because Iran showed that they were going to play ball with us, that they were in the negotiation process, that they just wanted some enrichment. And yet we came in and we killed the leader that put that prohibition on. The lesson that the other people who are coming up in the ranks in the Iranian regime have learned is that they better get a nuclear weapon. Otherwise, this is going to happen to them too. Actually, one of the most vindicated countries in this whole exchange has been North Korea, who obtained a nuclear weapon for this very reason. So if we want to make sure that countries that we're adversarial with or rogue countries don't try to develop a nuclear weapon, the second one of them gets to the negotiating table, the last thing that we should do is go and launch a regime change war, a decapitation strike against that leadership. So I think the lesson learned here is that now this galvanized, harder generation of IRGC officers and Ayatollahs are going to take over Iran. They better get a nuclear weapon. And that's going to be a major problem for us going forward. So that's why we need to take this round of negotiations very seriously. I hope President Trump used that talk, that bolster, that bluster to get them to the negotiating table. But there's only so many different times that you can use that. So the next time, if these negotiations don't go well and President Trump says, like, I'm going to annihilate you, that might not have the exact same effect. So
it won't have.
I think we have to be very careful with our language.
That's the point, Will. You know, I made the point yesterday. You become the boy that cried wolf, the emperor with no clothes. If you say we're going to wipe out an entire civilization and then nothing happens, well, you know, you become a bit of a lame duck in terms of your threats. I mean, I would put to you this.
Oh, did you want him to follow through?
No. Of course not.
Okay, good. Just checking.
Of course not. But here's what's interesting. Trump welcomed the 10-point plan as if it was somehow brand new, which it wasn't. But the 10-point plan, which he says is very workable in terms of the negotiations. Let's just go through this, and I'll ask you, how many of these do you think are acceptable? Number one, the Iranians want commitment to non-aggression. Number two, Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz.
This is just totally misconceived. Like, from the outset, he said that the 10 points, he just truthed about this. The 10 points that the reporters are saying, the ones you're quoting from, are not the basis on which he said.
Well, these are the 10 points, according to the Iranian media.
Yeah, it's not what Trump has agreed to, and he's repeatedly said this is not the thing he's workable. And he put out a slew of truths today saying he's going to continue to insist full dismantlement of the Iranian nuclear program, return of the highly enriched uranium, which, again, this whole idea that there was a peaceful fatwa. Remember, they had 60% enriched uranium, 11 kilograms, or 450 kilograms worth of it, enough for 11 bombs. Like,
so when Trump says he welcomes the 10-point plan, in fact, he doesn't at all.
What? He's looking for... I think the basis for the negotiations is something that's much more favorable to the United States.
Okay.
And
so why would he clarify that? So why would he say then he welcomes the 10-point plan?
Well, I think he was thinking of a different plan in his mind. That's the simple answer.
Come
but
off it, Will.
You know what?
The worst thing about
that's not what he was thinking
the worst
of.
Thing
and I don't know why
on
earth he would agree to that.
The torturous knots that people have pulled with their own...
You can literally just read his truth feed. He's like... And
it's not truthful.
White House rapid response on this. They've been like,
his
no, this isn't true.
Ironically...
Obviously, it's not true, because if Iran was getting these kind of concessions out of the United States, they'd have also been able to save Hezbollah, but they can't even do that.
OK, well, actually, it turns out that right now, Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz again and says it will not reopen as long as Israel's attacking Hezbollah in Lebanon. So who is...
It sounds like they've put a new condition on the deal. Perhaps they'll get struck again. That's probably very unwise of the Iranians.
Is it? Or is it wielding the most powerful tool in this whole war, which turns out to be a little piece of waterway which they can exercise control over and strangle and paralyze the global economy.
That didn't stop the United States from striking 13,000 targets over a period of 5 weeks, completely decimating the American military, the Iranian military.
None of that involves...
If it was that powerful, it should have been able to stop that from happening and force an earlier ceasefire. It wasn't.
Okay, but the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. So how successful is it?
I mean, honestly, you guys, everybody's just overblowing the Straits of Hormuz closure vis-a-vis the United States. We're the largest oil producer in the world. It's good for us if oil prices go up.
Just to be clear, Will, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, by most experts' analysis, has been the single greatest shock in a negative way to the global economy ever. Ever.
Well, that can't be true because oil prices were higher in the at the beginning of the Ukraine-Russia war. So that just can't be true.
This has had a greater negative impact on the global economy specific to energy of anything we've seen ever. And it's going to get worse.
I mean, again, then why did the price spike even more at the beginning of the Ukraine-Russia war?
I know you're a facts guy. Go and check the facts.
Okay. I mean, I'm sure somebody said that. I'm just saying, if you can't explain that discrepancy, I think you're overstating things.
All the economic analysts have said the same thing. This has been the worst energy shock that we've ever seen, ever. But look, I'm sure you're right. I'm sure it's kind of a trivial detail.
The complete destruction of the Iranian military.
All right, look, I've got to leave it there. Joe, last word to you. If you want.
Position.
Joe, last word to you.
No, I'm just saying, now the Iranians are in even a stronger position than they were prior to this war. The last 20 plus years of GWAT has shown us that we can basically take out targets, we can strike targets all day, and our enemies will endure simply by not losing, and they will use the leverage of the geography that they have at their disposal to have an effect that we can't sustain. And that's the position that we're in right now. Again, that's why exactly I hope that President Trump
they've lost their
uses this
military capability.
opportunity.
They can be as mad as they want. If they're throwing rocks, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, but if they're closing,
all they have to do is be able to affect the straits, and they can have a strategic effect.
Yeah.
They understand that now. They probably didn't understand that or weren't willing to use it prior to this iteration of war. And that's why President Trump is at the negotiating table right now, because he realizes the effect that was having on the American economy. And he made the right decision. I think President Trump made the right decision to get to the negotiating table. So now we have to pursue our objective, which is getting the straits open and maintaining the ceasefire and holding together the alliances that we have in the Gulf. And so to do that, we've got to restrain our junior partner, the Israelis.
Okay, I've got to leave it there. Thank you both very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.